Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Climate for Change's Online-A-Thon. I'm your host, funny lady Judith Lucy. We are in for a terrific evening. Although it's been a slightly bumpy start, we've had a couple of technical issues, so sorry we're starting a little bit late. But that doesn't mean tonight's not going to be amazing. But first, of course, we have to acknowledge that we are coming to you tonight from stolen lands, the many stolen lands that were taken from Aboriginal people all across this country. We particularly like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nation and the Eora Nation, where a lot of our speakers will be calling in from. We all know sovereignty was never ceded and that colonisation has resulted in terrible pain and injustice that continues to this day. I mean, it's hard to kind of comprehend the kind of heartache that the impacts of climate must have on the people who have cared for this country for so long. We know that Aboriginal people are some of the most affected by climate change. They are at the forefront of turning it around. So we really want to pay our respects to elders past and present, to all Aboriginal people watching tonight, and also would like to acknowledge the sadness of the passing of that incredible tiny giant, Jack Charles. But tonight is the beginning of Climate for Change's 5-week crowdfunding campaign. It's the third one online. It's the third one I'm hosting. And I am just delighted because tonight I'm not in my living room with my neighbours thinking I'm a maniac. I'm actually in the Climate for Change office with the wonderful CEOs Lena and Jane, who you'll meet in a moment. I'm thrilled that, especially for those of us in Melbourne, that we're not in lockdown like I think we were this time last year. I'm thrilled that I have less body hair because, look, I'll admit to you, this time last year, sure, I kept this part nice, but look, from the neck down, it was a nightmare. I just let everything go. To be honest with you, it was a jungle. It was like the Amazon rainforest. So at least I was storing carbon. I was doing my bit. I mean, my God, if you'd seen my armpits, tell you what, if I popped a beanie and a couple of googly eyes down there, you would have thought I was holding a couple of bearded hipsters hostage. So anyway, we can all breathe easy. That's great news. What's really exciting, though, is, as I say, this is the beginning of 5 weeks of crowdfunding for Climate for Change. They are aiming to raise $250,000. $15,000 has already been raised, but tonight I'm not going to say our goal is $50,000. I'm going to say we are raising $50,000 tonight because that is the money that this incredible grassroots organization needs to do the incredible work that they do, which is nothing short of changing the social climate in this country. That is so we can push politicians to do everything they can about and ultimately to reverse global warming. And without getting heavy on your asses, there is no greater issue. I cannot stress the importance of this. I know we're all feeling so much better since the election, but there is still so much work to do, and we know that time is of the essence. So if you're in a position where you can help out tonight and donate anything, please do. But tonight is not just about me harassing you to donate, but I will be doing a lot of that. Yes, it will be irritating. It may be irritating already. But tonight is also a celebration of the wonderful Climate for Change community. And my God, you are going to be hearing from some incredible speakers tonight. We're going to be hearing from Aussie rock legend and a man I've wanted to sleep with since I was 13. Yes, that's a little bit creepy. We'll be hearing from former Commissioner of New South Wales Fire and Rescue, the incredible Greg Mullins. I'm a little bit in love with Dr. Rebecca Huntley, who is, of course, the author of How to Talk About Climate Change in a Way That Makes a Difference. We'll be hearing from another lady I've been lucky enough to meet, the CEO of the Climate Council, Amanda McKenzie. We'll be hearing from Professor Frank Giotso, who is just a lead author with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Claire O'Rourke, an incredible journalist, will be popping by to tell us about her new book, Together We Can, which is inspiring stories of everyday people taking action on climate change. And we'll be hearing from C4C's own Mike McAvoy. There will be a raffle. There will be the opportunity to have Zoom catch-ups with a lot of the people I just mentioned and me. And there will be my very favorite thing, the mystifying and somewhat humiliating series of challenges. But we'll hear more about those in a minute. But what I'm saying to you is that you have got a night that is going to be uplifting, entertaining, and informative ahead of you. And if you donate, you get to feel like less of an asshole. So it really is just a win-win-win. Strap yourself in. It's not going to be a bumpy night. It's going to be a wonderful night. But to hear more about how tonight is going to work and basically to tell us a lot more about the wonderful C4C, I would like to introduce its two incredible CEOs, Lena and Jane. Good evening.
Hi, Judith. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm amazed we're not all just kind of sculling tequila, because it was a nerve-wracking few minutes, but just before we started, wasn't it, ladies?
I'm amazed that we are live, to be honest.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But I think that's a sign. We overcame that, which means we're going to raise at least $50,000. But Lena and Jane, tell us, who are you? Who are you? Why are you involved? And can you tell us a bit about the wonderful Climate for Change?
Thank you so much, Judith. What a magnificent introduction to tonight. And thank you so much to everyone who's tuning in tonight as well. My name's Jane Stabb. I'm a co-CEO with Lena here at Climate for Change. And as a way of introducing myself, I'm going to start by sharing a bit about why I'm here tonight. Like many of you, I am becoming increasingly concerned about climate change and the way that it's going to impact my family. I've got two little kids. Toby is 5 and Pip is 2. She's a big kid. She tells me I'm not allowed to call her a toddler anymore. Big kid too. I recently had an experience that really upset me as a parent. We've got this picture book at home called Are We There Yet? By Alison Lester. I don't know if anyone tuning in tonight has read the book. It's great. My kids call it the holiday book. It's about a family who pull their kids out of school for a term and travel around Australia. I was reading it recently with the kids and we got to the page where the family go snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, I'm a scuba diver and I often talk to Toby, my 5-year-old, about the places I've been diving and the things that you can see underwater. He's fascinated. He's got a doona cover with fish and crabs and sharks and dolphins on it. He loves hearing about the ocean. We were reading this book the other day and Toby asked me if when he's old enough to learn how to scuba dive, I could take him to see the Great Barrier Reef. And to be honest, the question stunned me. I did not know what to say to him because I don't know if it's going to be there when he's old enough to scuba dive. Scientists tell us that breaching 1.5 degrees of warming risks triggering abrupt, dangerous, and irreversible changes to our climate system. What we do this decade before 2030 will determine whether or not we can stay below 2 degrees warming. And this will be the difference between having a reef in parts that will be resilient enough to survive or not. It'll mean a huge difference in the amount of rainfall for our river catchments, like the Murray-Darling Basin, where we grow 90% of the food that we eat here in Australia. It'll mean a huge difference in the scale of heat waves, bushfires, floods, and droughts that we face. There's been a huge shift in the window of what is politically possible over the last 4 months since the election. I'm really hopeful that we can push the government to deliver what they promised, but we also know that it won't go far enough. We have to push our politicians to be more ambitious. Research came out recently that shows that 70% of people in Australia are seriously concerned about climate change and think that it's going to affect them personally by the end of the decade. But only 23% of people have ever spoken to their friends and family about it. So at Climate for Change, we support people to talk about climate, to talk about climate change to in their peer networks, with their family, with their friends, because the more we talk about it, the more we can increase the urgency of climate as a political issue, the more we can shift the conversation and lay the groundwork for our politicians to act. It's so lovely to be here with you tonight. I'm going to pass to my co-worker, Lena, to introduce herself.
Thank you, Jane. And thanks, Judith. So good to be in the same space.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's incredible. Although you talking about the children's book did remind me that I was a barren spinster Jane. But anyway, it doesn't mean that I'm not concerned about it as well. Back to you, Lena.
Oh, well, I'll talk about children's books too. No, thank you, Judith. I'm sorry, Jane. It's so beautiful to talk to all of you on this tonight. Thanks for being here. I came across Climate for Change actually from its beginnings about 9 years ago when I moved to Australia. And at the time, Climate for Change just was a little idea in the head of a wonderful woman called Katarina Gator, who is the founder of the organization. At the time, I just had moved from Europe, and I was also asking me and myself the question, are we there yet on climate change? But actually, I was experiencing a deep culture shock when I arrived here, and it was all around climate change. When I arrived here, I suddenly didn't have to ask myself anymore, how do we solve this climate crisis, but should we do anything about it at all? And it stuck with me, and it actually struck with me how it could be that in a country that's experiencing so closely the impact of climate change, action could be so behind, and at the same time, people experiencing it so closely would not talk about it and feel it's a divisive topic, something you should not talk about. So that's the moment I met Katarina. We talked about this, and she had a very simple idea about how to change the social climate on climate action. She thought that if we bring people together in their home with a trusted messenger, a friend who brings us close together, and we have the conversations about the fact, but especially air the fear, the experience we're all having with climate change, and connect over our fears, we can build hope, action, and community. And that's really at the base of Climate for Change. Because once we talk, we realize we're not alone. That when we share the same fears, and together they can act and create hope. It made instantly sense to me, and I ever after was part of Climate for Change. First as a volunteer, then as a board member, and now as a lucky co-CEO with Jane for the last 1.5 years or so.
Can I just interrupt and say that someone called Ben Shepherd has already donated $300? Round of applause, Ben. Which might, unless you'd like to tell us some more about actually Climate for Change, we could just get into how tonight is going to work.
Sure. I would love to talk a bit more about why climate change matters to me, but we can do that later.
I'm not interested, Lena. No, of course not. Lena, please. I'm scared.
No, I mean,
I just got so excited when I saw a donation.
I'm so excited about Ben too. Also, Ben, you got 3 tickets into a raffle as well.
Well, you'll hear about the raffle ad nauseum, in fact.
A lot. Well, climate change matters to me. It's personal to me. Similar to Jane, I have actually an 8-month-old who only let me sleep 3 hours last night. So I'm full of coffee and adrenaline right now. And while it's an exaggeration, I think, I always thought it was an exaggeration. Then people say everything changes when you have your bub. It really did for me. With my little baby, I am having so many amazing firsts. The first time lying under a tree, observing leaves move.
You ladies really are rubbing my face in it tonight.
Yeah,
go on.
Yep, it's a problem when you
But do donate for those of us who are childless as well. I have a nephew. I care about his future. Sorry, Lena, go on. It's just a sore spot.
I'm going to keep rubbing it in. Well, I'm looking forward to his first bushwalks, his first camping trip, our favorite beach along the Great Ocean Road, also with his friends, his cousins. But if I think about the impact of climate change is going to have on his life, like we tend to talk about 2030, it really terrifies me. I actually get frozen in fear. Just since he was born, this is like the last 8 months of all our lives, we've gone through mega floods in Queensland and unprecedented heat waves in the Northern Hemispheres where his grandparents live. Scientists tell us that most likely he will experience summers in Melbourne, similar to the 2020 mega fire we went through. That's us also experiencing them. It's not just him. Summers of smoke and fire, being afraid of family in the countryside. Summers of instead of finding sea creatures and rock pools and having beautiful experiences in the Australian bush, are going to be summers full of smoke where you can't go out and you're again in a lockdown because the air is too unsafe to breathe. I'm not alone with my fears, be it for our children, be it for ourselves. Climate change is a question of survival for all of us. But we can create a safer future for him, for us, and for his generation and the generation who come after him. Climate for Change helped me realize that. Our conversations bring people together to support them to talk about this really frightening and difficult and really issue that we're facing, this like human-made catastrophe, really. And I think like when we come together, there's a moment of magic in it. Like we hear sometimes from people who say they have never talked to their aunt, nephew, cousin about the topic, even so they all care. And when they come together in one of our conversations, this is the first time they're having this deep conversation, they connect with their fear, and this is what activates them. So since our humble beginnings, and in the 3 years that Judith has supported us too. We've gone from having a conversation at Kat's home in Seddon, which is a beautiful home, by the way. I mean, it's just a beautiful home, to having reached 11,000 people across Australia and having had conversations all over the country, which is amazing. And now we can go a bit more into climate change, Judith, if you want.
Please do. And then let's get this show on the road. But tell us a bit more about the organisation. Then I think we really need to get into telling people how they can actually be involved.
Should I talk about the impact that we're going to have and what donations tonight are actually going to support?
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Awesome.
I mean, why should I bother, Jane? Why should I do what Ben Shepherd did, and why should I open my wallet?
So our mission here at Climate for Change is to create the social climate in Australia for effective action on climate change. We're working to build support across the federal parliament for action. We need to get to a stage where no matter who's in government, they know they have to do the right thing by our climate. We've got an opportunity to shift the government to deliver what they promised before the election and to raise ambition on climate. And we also need to shift the position of the conservative side of politics to shift that political middle ground that politicians so often work in. Over the next 12 months, we're building a climate leaders conversation program that'll support volunteers to have conversations in strategic communities across the country, communities that we know are well placed to pull us closer to bipartisan support. We're aiming to reach 3,000 people over the next 12 months through our deep, transformative conversations, people across the political divide, across age groups, across demographics, in regional and urban communities. We're going to support our conversation volunteers, so our conversation hosts and facilitators, to activate powerful and influential local communities that they have relationships of trust within. So these are communities like local Rotary clubs, country women's associations, local sports teams, local business groups. And we'll support these communities that our volunteers activate to meet their local MPs and tell their stories. So we've got a huge job ahead of us, and we are funded almost entirely from donations from our incredible supporters and through our annual crowdfunding campaign that we are launching tonight, right this very minute. We get critical funds that allow us to do this important work. We could not do it without everyone that's tuning in tonight. So thank you so much for joining us.
We need your money, or there will be mass extinctions and the planet will burn to a cinder. So just don't waste time. So what we need to know from Lena and Jane is, how do people go about donating?
Pretty easy. You just jump onto challengeforclimate.com. Yep, we can now see the website in the screen. Awesome. You scroll down, you could just click donate. Maybe you're here to support a friend of yours. Maybe you're here to support me. Then type in Lena. I'll come up, and then you can click donate, and it will go to choose $200, $1,000. Put in your details, put in a message, that's it. Maybe you also are here because you want to join us as a fundraiser. If you want to do that, click sign up. Put in your name, choose a photo. Don't upload a photo. Don't worry about it. Just sign up. Choose the Ask Challenge and join us. It's going to be super fun. We would love you on the team.
And don't think, people. You're not just. Don't think at all. Just give us your cash. But it's not just about. Sure, you're saving the entire planet, and that should be enough. But if you want more, there is more, isn't there? Can you tell us about the raffle?
Yes.
The raffle, yes, I can tell you about the raffle. So tonight only, if you donate $100 or more before 8 p.m. tonight, you will automatically enter the raffle to win some wonderful thank you gifts donated by companies who've generously supported our fundraiser tonight. So every $100 gives you one ticket. If you give $200, you get 2 tickets. And we'll draw the raffle as soon as the event tonight is over and email the winners as soon as we can after the event. So thank you gifts that you could win include a 3-month subscription to Market Lane's Coffee Club. That is fresh coffee delivered to your door for 3 months from our friends at Market Lane Coffee. It is delicious, valued at $130. There's a $250 voucher from Melbourne clothing store Gorman. There's a signed copy of Greg Mullins' Firestorm book, which you'll hear more about tonight, a signed copy of Claire O'Rourke's book, Together We Can, and a signed copy of Rebecca Huntley's book, How to Talk About Climate Change
and I'm just
in a
going
way
to
that makes a difference.
interject there, Jane, because of course no one asked for a signed copy of my book, but I just insisted on bringing it anyway. So whether you like it or not, you might also get a copy of this turkey. Okay, but anyway, no, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I haven't got children, and no one wanted my book. Carry on. What about these coffee catch-ups? How do they work?
Coffee catch-up. So even more reason to donate tonight. Some of our guests have generously offered a half-hour Zoom coffee catch-up, which you can go into the draw to win simply by donating, again, $100 or more to their fundraising page. These guests are Judith Lucy, the one and only.
Yes, they had to have me for that. They didn't want me. I had to talk them into that as well.
Mark Seymour, who would not want a coffee with Mark Seymour, Frank Jotso, Amanda McKenzie, and Claire O'Rourke. So jump onto the donation page, search for the person that you want to win a coffee catch-up with, donate $100 or more. We'll also pop the links into the chat during the interviews. So it'll be really easy to find. So if you want to donate to a friend who's fundraising tonight, that is also how you find your friend's page, by searching on the fundraising site for their name.
And now I'm excited because there are always humiliating and totally mystifying challenges. And Lena and Jane, I believe potentially you two might be involved in a little bit of a challenge. Is that correct?
That is correct. Our fundraising goal for tonight is $50,000 before the event is over tonight. Sorry, before the event tonight, our incredible fundraisers have already actually raised almost $25,000.
Oh my God.
It was 15 when before we looked at this twice, and now it's up to 25 almost.
And thank you, Darren Stevens, who just donated $200.
Thank you so much, Darren. So if we reach this goal of $50,000 tonight, Lena and I are committed to doing something completely ridiculous and disgusting, which is smashing a cream cake into each other's faces. We have these deliciously disgusting cakes that we're going to smear throughout the night. We're going to decorate them. We've got jam, we've got tomato sauce, we've got mustard, we've got peanut butter. It's going to be disgusting, and I really do not want to do it. But if you want to see Lena and I squash disgusting things into each other's faces, please help us reach our goal of $50,000 tonight, and we will do it.
I would like to make the point that I'm not involved in that challenge in any way, shape or form, and that I have no intention of doing anything even remotely humiliating, even though that's what I've been doing for the last 34 years of my life. Now, I think it's time that we get rocking and rolling, ladies. Anything else you'd like to add, or should I introduce our first amazing guest?
I have one. Like, what about if someone would like to support their friend and win a ticket to meet Judith Lucy for a coffee? Like,
but I
who wouldn't
think
want
we
to
did
do
touch
that?
on that, didn't we?
You need to we didn't say how you could have both. If you were here to support your friend and you want the ticket and you want a raffle ticket, you would go to Judith Lucy, donate $100. You will go into the raffle for the prizes plus Judith Lucy, and then put in support Lena. It's for Lena, and then it will be allocated to my fundraising.
Or it's
goal.
for Jane. This is a donation for Jane Stab, is another example of what you could do.
And then you say it's for Lena, and then it goes in.
Yeah, I think we've got it. And I think it's really time to get to the first guest, because it is he's a firefighter, so I'm already excited. It's the incredible Greg Mullins, former Commissioner of New South Wales Fire and Rescue, founder of Emergency Leaders for Climate Action, and he has been at the front line of fighting fires for just decades. What an extraordinary man he is. And a little bit of a trigger warning, because there is some pretty full-on discussion about the bushfires and the impacts of climate change. But now, take it away, Greg and Jane.
Thank you so much for joining us, Greg. We just really appreciate your time. And before I get started, I wanted to say a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service, not just as a Commissioner for Fire and Rescue New South Wales, but also as a frontline firefighter. I grew up in a bushfire town myself, and I know the feeling of driving away from a bushfire. I just cannot imagine what it feels like to drive into one. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. Look, it's just, as you know, living in a town that's often threatened by bushfires, you grow up knowing that you all have to band together. It's all about protecting community, and I grew up with that, watching Dad take off on the fire truck, Mum helping out, and so there was really no question what I'd do when I started to grow up, and I'm still doing.
You fought your first big fire when you were 12 years old, extraordinary, and have since spent decades both on the front line and in command centres. What was it like growing up as a firefighter?
Well, when I grew up, we were surrounded by National Park, and I remember looking out over the hills during summer, and there'd be orange glows all over the place. And I'd say to my mother, "So which one's Dad fighting?" And she'd go, "I think it's that big fire over there." And, you know, okay. And I remember him coming home late at night, black with soot and smelling like smoke. And I'd ask him about what happened, and he'd tell me stories about it. But we lived right across the road from the fire shed, and there was an old ex-World War II fire truck that I could ride faster on my push bike. I'd get to the fires before they did. But, and it was just in my blood. But I remember that day in October 1971 like it was yesterday, and my first big fire, and it was a mixture of being frightened, being awestruck, excited, and it was all the elements coming together: the heat, the wind, the dryness, the bushland, all the different ways that different trees and shrubs reacted. And I just found it fascinating, and I was hooked. But I look back and yeah, fear was a big part of it, but my dad was there and he just knew what to do, and he showed me how to stay safe. And then over the decades from there, I fought many, many fires under Dad's command. He was a volunteer, then I went into the full-time fire brigade, and it just held me in good stead right up to now. I'm back as a volunteer, sort of retired. Yeah, right. But I love doing stuff in the community, and fires is the thing I know.
Can you describe for us what Black Summer 2019-2020 was like for you?
Yeah, Black Summer, how can I put it? It was a horror show. I knew, together with 22 other former fire and emergency chiefs who I'd pulled together into emergency leaders for climate action, we were able to speak out because we weren't employed by governments anymore, and we'd been muzzled, well and truly muzzled when we were employed. You didn't talk about climate change because it was political. But we saw the build-up. For example, in Tasmania, where big fire seasons used to be 30 years apart, had big fires in the late 90s, 2006, 2013, 2016, 2018, and the rainforests that had never burned were burning. The button grass in the highlands, the high country, the World Heritage areas that can't burn were burning. So this ecological catastrophe, and then we had big fires in Queensland, New South Wales as well. And we knew if it stayed dry, 2019 was going to be really bad. So we tried to warn the Prime Minister. So, and look, to cut a long story short, I fought fires all over the state. We were fighting fires from basically July, where the New South Wales fire season is supposed to start in October, which was just evidence that the fire seasons now are much longer because of climate change. We had the hottest, driest year ever, the worst fire danger conditions by far in history. And we lost 11 times more homes in New South Wales alone than the biggest fire season ever before, you know, in the years prior to that. And the fires went until we had floods in March 2020. So, and one catastrophe following another. So extremes in temperature, in weather conditions, and that's climate change at work. One of the big things that was different was fire-driven storms, which used to be rare and a thing of legend. Everybody saw them that summer. There were probably, I think 39 was the last count that the researchers are saying, where the average over the previous 40 years was 1.5 a year, you know, but it was ramping up. That's because it's so hot, so much drier, so much hotter. So we saw fires burning overnight as if they were burning during the day, and we just couldn't put them out. So absolute horror show, compounded by a government that lied and would not listen. And that was really upsetting.
You've said in the past, when fighting fires, you're so focused on the job that you got to get done that you.
Thank you so much, Greg. I found that interview inspiring, terrifying, and he does slightly give me the horn. And I also think it will be hard to beat, could be the line of the night, Greg referring to our former government as manifestly stupid. Now, Jane, I believe you've actually finished reading the book. What's it like?
This book had a huge impact on me, actually. I grew up in the country in a little town called Macedon, which is an hour north of Melbourne. It's right at the meeting point of Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung, Taungurung and Dja Dja Wurrung countries. Our family's got a bush block out there still. We've got 50 acres in the middle of the Wombat Forest. It's gorgeous, a dry eucalypt forest that is actually terrifying on a bushfire day. And the towns that Greg talks about in his book are towns like the one I grew up in. And his story is really familiar to me. My dad was in the fire brigade when we were kids. Everyone in our town was. In fact, Dad was regaling my son Toby recently with stories from his firefighting days. It was pretty funny. A lot less hardcore than what Greg has been through. But bushfires did come close to our place. I have a memory of a bushfire coming really close to our place one summer, and Mum and Dad driving us to the roadblock that the fireys had set up at the end of our road, and our auntie picking us up before Mum and Dad went back to defend the house. And I have this really clear memory of looking out the back window of the car as we drove away in tears as a little kid, not understanding why, if it was too dangerous for us kids to stay, why Mum and Dad were staying. Greg's book is a terrifying account of the way the seasons have changed over the last 3 decades. He describes firsthand accounts of fire tornadoes, of increasingly common pyrocumulonimbus storms where the fire's so strong that it creates its own weather. The fires that Greg describes in his book are so different from what fires used to be when I was a kid. I've heard experts, you might have as well, talking about the Anthropocene, the era that we're in now where human behaviour is shaping our environment and our climate. Greg talks in his book about the Pyrocene, the era of fire. And when I first read that, it sent chills down my spine. One other thing that really stuck with me from Greg's book is that we've probably got 2 decades worth of warming already locked in. The pollution that we've put into the atmosphere means that we're going to face increasingly dangerous fire seasons for 2 decades, which is a pretty difficult thing to come to terms with. But what happens after that is the thing that's up to us.
I'll be dead by then, so that's a real shame.
And you don't have kids,
no,
right?
I don't, for you.
Well, in 2040, my kids are going to be in their 20s, and the decisions that we make now really will determine whether or not the world's safe for them.
Does Greg kind of go into solutions as well in the book?
We hear a lot about solutions actually coming up in our interviews. We've got Amanda McKenzie, who gives a really good, analysis of the solutions that the government can put forward, but also that we as a community can. So we've got a lot more on that coming up.
I would love to read Greg's book. And you know what? I could win myself a copy of it if I donated $100 before 8 o'clock tonight, or maybe about 8:06, because we did start a little late. And then you automatically go into the raffle where you could win Greg's book, my book that nobody wanted, Claire O'Rourke's, Rebecca Huntley's incredible book, 3 months of coffee from Market Lane, and a $250 voucher from Gorman. So start donating. And in fact, I'm going to say thank you to, thank you to Victoria Eager. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, for $200. Thank you to Laura Lynch for donating $300. And I think we had Joyce Lloyd before too, who'd also donated $300. So thank you so much. This is just the beginning. Let's keep it coming, because I want to see these 2 insufferable mothers smoosh a cake into their faces. But now let's go with another amazing guest. it's time for Frank Giozzo, who is Professor of Environmental Economics and Climate Change Economics at the ANU Crawford School of Public Policy, where he directs the Center for Climate and Energy Policy, along with being a lead author with the Intergovernmental Panel, I can't speak anymore, on climate change. Look, clearly the guy knows his shit. So it's over to Jane and Frank.
Great. Thank you so much, Frank Giozzo, for joining us tonight. Really appreciate your time. It's a real pleasure to have you along. You've been a lead author on Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports. The language in these reports could not be clearer about the need to make immediate, deep cuts to emissions across all sectors of our economy. And yet here we are with a plan to cut pollution by half of what we need. What does it feel like to work on these IPCC reports and to know what you know?
Well, the science is really clear. We need to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions dramatically in order to avoid the worst of climate change impacts. But the message is also a very positive one from the summary of the science as we have it from the IPCC, and that is we can do this. We can do it more easily than we thought we might be able to in the past, primarily because the technologies exist and the technologies are rapidly becoming cheaper. And we now understand how a low emissions economy is a sustainable economy, is an economy that brings economic prosperity, and that can also be a benefit for social outcomes through energy, access, equity. And so all of these things are making it much more readily possible to meet the challenge, or to meet the challenge to some extent, than what we thought possible 5 or 10 years ago.
What needs to happen here in Australia to put us in a position to respond to the climate crisis at a scale and a pace that's going to solve the problem?
In Australia, we have a very high emissions economy, one that is built around cheap and available fossil fuels. That needs to dramatically change, and we need to move to a near zero carbon economy. And the wonderful thing is it's eminently possible in Australia to do this. And in fact, it's already starting. And the key is, of course, the practically unlimited opportunity that we have in reliable and cheap renewable energy, solar and wind, principally covered through energy storage. And those will be the energy systems of the future, and they will power our industries, they will power our homes, they will power our transport, and they will increasingly help in agriculture as well.
You've spoken about the need for deep decarbonisation. What does that mean?
By deep decarbonization, we mean a fundamental change of industrial energy and transport systems to shift to a zero emissions basis. We don't just mean incremental change, we mean new technologies that run without greenhouse gas emissions or extremely low greenhouse gas emissions. And so marginal improvement would be the shift from a normal car to a hybrid drivetrain. Systems transition, deep decarbonization is the shift to an electric car that is then charged entirely using renewable energy, solar power and wind power in our case. That's what we're after. That's what needs to happen. It needs to happen in a power system where it's already going on. We have a direct transition from coal-fired power to wind and solar already happening in Australia. That transition needs to accelerate. That zero carbon electricity supply will then enable a zero carbon electrification in transport, in industry, in the building sector, everywhere else in the economy. And so that deep systems change is what is needed and what we will increasingly see happen.
A lot of people are feeling hopeful about the opportunities that come with a change in government. What do you think the key opportunities are over the next term of Parliament?
The new federal government has a suite of policies that they plan to introduce in industry, to an extent in power and transport as well. Much more can be done. We can go beyond the 43% emission reduction target. And in fact, the next cab off the rank, so to speak, will be a 2035 emissions target. And that will need to go much further on the road to net zero by 2050 or earlier on. And so what we need to see is governments facilitating very large investments in the power sector, in the revamp of Australian industry in R&D for the agricultural sector to make Australian agriculture and land-based activities climate-proof, more resilient to climate change impacts, and also more adept to using the opportunities to shift towards lower emissions products and processes. So all of that requires a very large effort. Federal government has an important part to play in this, but the state and territory governments, as well as local governments, matter significantly in this as well, in particular in responding to climate change impacts as they will come to us.
And finally, what gives you hope?
There's tremendous reason for optimism on the technology side of things, in particular in moving to very low emission settings. We now know how to do this, and we are confident that we can do this in a way that actually benefits the Australian economy. Another thing to be very, very hopeful about is the extent of engagement right throughout society on the issue of climate change. This is something that has really proven to rally people behind a common cause. And that is, of course, a tremendously positive thing, not only to tackle climate change, but also for a sense of purpose and a shared sense of mission that so many of us have.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time tonight.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frank. And I just love the way that Frank talks about that shared sense of purpose, because I have to say that the more I have to do with climate change, sure, it took me a while to get here, but I'm here now, and better late than never. But I can't tell you how it has really changed my life. You know, I've recently finished making a podcast for Radio National called Overwhelmed and Living, which is all about climate change. I've met so many extraordinary people doing that. I actually interviewed Katarina Gator, who's of course the founder of Climate for Change. We went along to a Climate for Change MP engagement group, which I'm now involved in. We'll hear more about those later. We interviewed Rebecca Huntley as well, but it's incredible that once you actually start getting involved in any kind of activism for this incredible issue, it galvanizes you. I mean, it has really changed how I think, and it has altered every day for me. I'm not kidding. It's like this was the purpose I've been looking for a very long time. Stop being serious. No one wants that from a funny lady, Judith. But I just want to thank Frank for mentioning that, because I've really experienced that. If you would like to talk more to Frank, who wouldn't? Maybe not as much as you want to talk to me. But of course, if you donate $100 or more to Frank's fundraising page, you will go in the running to have a Zoom half-hour coffee catch-up with him. You can also have a coffee catch-up with me, Mark Seymour, Amanda McKenzie, and Claire O'Rourke. So please, well, we don't care why or how you donate the money, because you can do that, or you can donate $100 or more and go in for the raffle. And the raffle is amazing too, because you could win my book, Rebecca Huntley's book, Greg's book. You get wonderful clothing voucher from Gorman, and also you get 3 months of coffee from Market Lane. That is pretty fantastic. So we don't care how, we don't care why. I am going to thank Jane Fraser, who's donated $200. I'm going to thank Margaret Easterbrook, who's donated $200. And I'm going to thank Azalea. No, she's actually just put it up. Azalea, stop working for Climate for Change and make a donation. Danae Yeoman, I hope that I have pronounced that. Oh my God, $500 from Kirsty Trail. Incredible. But don't stop. You know, donate for a coffee catch-up. Oh, and if you want to also donate to a friend's fundraising page with the coffee catch-ups, I'm so excited. I'm producing a lot of saliva. Just put your friend's name in the comment section. So do it for the coffee catch-ups. Do it for the raffles. Just do it. Now, Lena, we did hear some optimistic stuff from Frank. What's keeping you hopeful?
Thanks, Judith. It was so good to hear you articulating what gives you hope, because for me, it's exactly the same. At the moment, I can feel quite frozen around climate change. And I know for lots of people who, like, when it's the first time you open your mind and you inform yourself on what's coming ahead, it can be really frightening. But like the psychologists for Safe Climate say, exactly what you described is that what gives you most hope. It's connecting with people who feel the same like you, realizing you're not alone. You're actually with many people behind you, and then doing a joint purpose and acting together, which is like what you all are doing today, joining us in the Challenge for Climate. That is connecting with others, having a joint purpose and making a difference, because all the little bits we can do together make a difference. And for me, it's the people in the community of Climate for Change that gives me hope every day. Every day at my work, I'm so lucky. I meet people who inspire me with the action they're taking. That's sometimes, for example, Rachel, who hosted a conversation with her mother at the time. That's the conversation I talked about, where people for the first time connected and talked about climate change. And now they're both facilitators, and they're like this mom-daughter duo. Like, so wholesome, it's nearly disgusting. No, they're really beautiful. And Rachel, who also connected to all her MPs and like lead up to the last elections, organized conversations with all the candidates except for one who declined, but at least she asked him, and connected with them and really showed what it means to be an active citizen. It's people like Susan, who some of you might have, like if you were here last year, you might have heard her story, who felt like, who lives in regional Queensland, an area where politicians tell us people don't care, but that's not true. So Susan was feeling quite alone. She went to a conversation, and now she is one of her community leaders and has about 100 people around her who care about climate change she connects with. She knows she's not alone. She's empowered, and she's asking for change. And that's what makes me hopeful, because we have the solutions. We know how to fix this crisis. We have to. We have no other option. It's a question of survival we're going in here. And if we come together and we push, we can get it done. We have this window of opportunity right now. We mentioned before we had a change of government. It's better. It got elected with a climate mandate. We have now in the Greens and Independent pushing as well, but it's way not enough. We have moved from the question like, should we do something about climate change, to yes, we should do something. Now we have to ask ourselves how fast, and we have to do it as fast as it's needed. And that needs support. It needs all of us to come together and create a social mandate for strong and fast climate action. And I believe we can do that.
We can absolutely do that. But that sense of community is just, it's so empowering. It's fantastic. Now, speaking of community, we do have my very favorite part of the evening. Jane, can you please talk us through, what the challenges are and what this first one is? And I would like to thank the incredible support of Ethical Investments, who are sponsoring these challenges and who also are going to throw in another $1,000 if we reach our $50,000 tonight, which of course we will do.
We, like I said before, Lena and I are working on our cakes, decorating. Lena, I don't know if you know, she hates sweets, so I'm making a beautiful savory cake for Lena to smush into her face. It's got Vegemite, it's got mustard, it's got garlic ale.
Very thoughtful. And garlic, look, it's a balm. It's going to help you not get a cold.
It's going to keep on giving this cake. So Lena and I are going to smush these disgusting things into each other's faces. We are not the only ones doing a challenge tonight. We've got some of our wonderful fellows, our Climate for Change fundraising and communications fellows, and our board members doing challenges tonight. So chances are that you're here tonight to support one of your friends or family. Thank you so much if you have come along for that reason. Every year, Climate for Change runs a communications and fundraising fellowship, which is a 4-month volunteer program which involves weekly online training sessions where fellows learn essential skills for entering the not-for-profit sector. Over the last month or so, more than that, these fellows have been working super hard, and they have all brought us here tonight. They've put their fundraising skills to immediate effect, bringing us to, goodness, what are we up to now? $28,000?
Get out.
Amazing work, everyone. So we have got 2 fellows challenges tonight. We have the chickpea challenge, where we're gonna see how fast people can put chickpeas from one bowl to another using chopsticks,
which is
hilarious.
A very important life skill.
And we've also got the fellows grape challenge, which is how many grapes can fellows fit inside their mouth at any one time. We've also got the board challenge, where the board are going to act out a ridiculous scene climate impacts and solutions.
It's performance art. That's what I've been told,
Performance art.
Jane. And it's the most extraordinary thing I've ever sat through. It really, I was a drama student and it makes my drama days look pretty sensible.
Oh my goodness.
But what's the first challenge that we're having?
So the first challenge, before I tell you about that, I'm just going to say another huge thank you to Ethical Investment. Ethical Investment are going to sponsor these fellows and the board. $200 for the first prize, $100 for the second prize, and every single fellow who did a challenge gets $50 donated to their page from Ethical Investment. So you get to vote for these challenges. You vote for your favorite fellow by putting their name into the chat. And the first one is the Chickpea Challenge.
Here we go. Over to you, fellows.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm fundraising for Climate for Change because I'm passionate about preserving our beautiful natural world for generations to come. And I believe we can achieve this through strong community action.
Hi, I'm Carissa, and I'm fundraising for Climate for Change because I believe we owe it to not only every other person on this planet, but every other living creature to keep this planet beautiful.
Hi, I'm Saki. I do care about climate action because I know people, including us, have been damaging nature and making beautiful plants and animals endangered. So I believe this fundraising is going to be my big first step towards climate change. I'm really excited about that.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I've joined the Fellowship with Climate for Change because it's a cause that I really hold close to my heart, and I want to do the best I can to help. And I believe that being surrounded by like-minded people that share the same interests really helps the journey.
And lastly, hi, I'm Ella, and I'm fundraising for Climate for Change because they've given me a clearer pathway for how I can contribute to climate action. I really believe in what they're doing, and I hope they can continue empowering people who have also been feeling a bit unsure or stuck. So, with all the introductions done, welcome to our Chickpea Chopstick Challenge, where each of us will compete to see how many chickpeas we can move from one plate to another using chopsticks in only 1 minute. Go!
Oh God.
Okay, time.
Oh.
That's some incredible technique. They're really amazing. Thank you, crazy bunch of tomatoes. Don't forget to vote for your favorite fellow by putting their name in the chat. We'll hear who the winner is in a minute. But first, let's have a quick hello from Tim Fitzpatrick from Ethical Investment Services. They've got my super. Over to you, Tim.
Hi there, my name is Tim Fitzpatrick and I'm a financial advisor with Ethical Investment Services. On behalf of AEST, I just wanted to say how proud we are to support the work of Climate for Change. I'm up in Brisbane where earlier this year we were impacted by significant flooding. If you can see next to me, it's a green park with cars going past at the moment, but for a while there it was Brown Lake canoes and SES boats. It wasn't just us though, the floods throughout Eastern Australia were some of the nation's worst recorded flood disasters. And unfortunately, it's expected to only get worse. This is why we think it's important to keep up the conversation about climate change. And this is why we support the work that you do. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And now it's time to hear from another totally top-shelf human being, Dr. Rebecca Huntley, social researcher, activist, and author of a book that I can't recommend enough, How to Talk About Climate Change in a Way That Makes a Difference. Over to you, Lena and Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca. It's so lovely to see you tonight. Thank you so much for all your research you do around how people feel about climate change and how we communicate. We use it on a daily basis at Climate for Change, and thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm really happy to be here. You do amazing work. Always happy to support you.
Thank you. Well, my first question for you tonight is, As I mentioned, you're a researcher who looks into how people feel and communicate about climate change, and especially have been looking in the climate compasses around climate attitudes and climate change for a while now. Has that way Australians feel about climate change shifted over the last few years?
Well, look, this is the $64 million question, or whatever it is. So we're about to update Climate Compass. But in the 3 years from when we started Climate Compass to now, we have also been just kind of running the Climate Compass questions in range of surveys, not at the scale of the Climate Compass itself, but just to see what's changing. And there has been some evidence that there's been some shifts in people becoming more concerned, or I think more interestingly, even if people don't move necessarily from one segment to another, so from concern to alarmed, I think we might be getting some attitudinal changes within those segments about what's possible, what we can do, what we should do. And I think one of the big drivers of that has actually been extreme weather, as well as the election of a recent federal government that seems to take climate change a little bit more seriously than previous governments, and a whole range of other things.
But when you're saying it has shifted, is that across the whole board? Like, does it feel different for city people, to country people, a core community? I feel like that the question would be, it's inevitable. Like, now, what are we going to do? Like, is it? What can you say already?
Yeah, I mean, look, we first of all have to remember that the vast majority of the Australian population believed climate change was happening, felt that the future of energy in Australia was renewable energy, was worried about the environment. So we already had the vast majority of the community with us. Whether you live in the city, or whether you live in country areas, or whether you know what kind of your background is in terms of family background and ethnicity. So we already had the vast majority of the population. And what I always do when I use the Climate Compass and talk about it is about 91% of the population are there to be convinced, or already convinced about the science, or there to be convinced about the solutions. Only about 9% of the population are people we would describe as dismissive, who just don't want to engage. So we've already got people. It's absolutely clear that we don't necessarily have very specific studies beyond things like generational differences and location differences about how particular communities feel. One of the really good things about the next update of the Climate Compass is that we're going to dig deeper into first, second and third generation migrant communities and how they feel. That being said, in the past, in larger scale surveys that I've done, for example, Australia Talks, there are negligible differences between communities based on their ethnic background on attitudes to climate. Like, there really aren't huge differences, but we need to interrogate that further. And of course, we also need to understand a bit more about how different communities feel about the solutions. And that is very much, you know, when you think about things like renewable energy, you're going to necessarily feel differently about that if you live in a regional area that's been, become prosperous and become successful because of fossil fuels. But there might also be the same kinds of places that could benefit from renewable energy. So you hear in the qualitative research I do quite different approaches to that issue than you would in the city when you've never met somebody who's ever worked in the energy sector. So of course there are going to be those differences.
No, I think it's really exciting. Right? I mean, the reasons why people's attitudes are changing are not exciting, because we're all experiencing climate change directly, no matter where we are. We breathe the air, we live through the fires, we live through the floods.
Yes.
But if we think about that 90%, you said, of Australian, 91% of Australians care and they have a strong relationship to it. What do we need to do to shift that from being concerned to being actually active? Because what your research has shown in the past is people care, but then that's not enough for them to activate and actually change the way they behave or vote. Even so, we saw that a bit on the election.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that the thing that makes people connect any big issue that is an overwhelming complex issue, that's economic, social, environmental, with action is the sense of a lived experience, of a sense of having some kind of skin in the game, and this matters to me right now. And so what we have an opportunity to do right now, given we now have a federal government that's prepared to talk about climate change openly, create a whole series of policies across portfolios to do something about it, and I think is serious about making sure that we're not lagging behind the rest of the world on this, and we're actually somewhere in the middle of the pack taking the opportunities that are available to us. What I think that's going to happen increasingly for people is people are going to have a lived experience of the benefits of their lives to acting on climate, as much as they've had personal negative experiences with the impact of climate change on their lives, in terms of, you know, everything from burning or flooding your business, hurting people that you love, taking away places that you love, or ruining your holidays. So I think what's going to happen, and what we're going to see happen over the next couple of years, is more and more renewable energy projects open up that create opportunities and jobs and opportunities for business. More and more people see community batteries installed, which allows them to have access to renewable energy, which will keep their energy costs low. And I think that's going to change it. It's going to make it seem less of a kind of scary, remote, disconnected issue where all they think about is the cost of action, to start realising that there are benefits of action and costs of inaction. And for me, the thing that was so interesting in the last federal election, with the research that the broader climate movement did coming out of that election, is that when we looked across all electorates about what the top issues were that were actually driving people's vote, it was climate, but it was also cost of living and the economy. And to me, the fact that people might connect those things, that we cannot have a healthy, sustainable economy without a healthy, sustainable attitude to the environment and really, really good climate policy, and that cost of living is going to spin out of all control if we don't actually have a view about where we need to be with energy, food security, all the rest of it. So I think for me, it was almost like climate came up as an issue that was a material, tangible issue, as material and tangible to people as the economy and cost of living. And that's a really good thing. And if we can build on that in the next 3 years, then that will continue to keep climate there in the frame for the vast majority of people, and therefore for governments, and hopefully for the private sector as well.
And if we look into how we communicate to that vast majority and like propel that hope, there's like, I feel like a sense of hope there. What are your tips for people to have conversations around climate change? And like maybe also like a hope-induced conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I always have a bit of a formula, which is before you start talking to people, you just need to listen a little bit and understand the mindset, the worldview, the values, and the baggage they bring to the climate change conversation. So in the same way as you kind of try and get to know somebody at a party or a first date or whatever before you launch into your views about anything, it's always good to know the approach that they take. And I think the other thing, and perhaps this is happening more than ever before, which is also great, is that one of the biggest challenges in the past to a fruitful conversation around climate is that a lot of people talking about climate change wasn't something that they did much. They've been talked at about climate change, and they've seen, you know, people yell and scream at each other on the, you know, social media and the TV, but they probably hadn't ever had an opportunity to have a conversation about it in a kind of relaxed setting where there wasn't a fear of upsetting people. But I think what is exciting, and what we're increasingly seeing in the research, is that there is more social permission to have a conversation about climate change, whether it be in the professional setting. People would be exposed to conversations around climate in their profession because so many companies and so many organisations are thinking about, well, what are our commitments around net zero? And again, the fact that we've got a federal government change around this is going to accelerate that. So they would have heard conversations in their own professional circles. They would have also seen that in the last election, whether it be, you know, community independence or Greens doing well in Queensland, or, you know, the Australian Labor Party, you know, dialing up its rhetoric around that, they'd also see, well, in politics, there's lots of people talking about it in a way that doesn't seem terrible and divisive and a kind of dead-end conversation that's going to collapse. You know, they can kind of see a growing consensus at the political level across this, largely across the spectrum. So again, there's social permission to talk about it there. And then I think they're increasingly going to start hearing people who they never thought would talk about climate change start to talk about it. So I think why we're lucky at the moment is that if you do find yourself having an opportunity to have a conversation about climate change, you're not necessarily breaking new ground in a way that you might have 10 years ago, where people think, oh, why are you talking about this? So I think we are starting to get a bit more of a conversation around this. So I think one of the things I often do is ask, you know, where do people get their information? You know, have you ever thought much about it? Is anybody in your work talking about it? I try and get a sense of what the landscape is around that person and what their, you know, what their experience of talking about it is. And then I'm always interested about, you know, there is literally not a profession or not a suburb, either a profession or a region in Australia that hasn't been exposed to climate change in some way. And so that's a really good way to start talking about it. And once you've done that, I think once you've established that rapport, it then is often best to just leave it with that person to think about, to kind of mull it over. And then in the past, when I've had these kinds of conversations, it is, and I, you know, I see people later on, they often say, well, we had that conversation and then 2 weeks later, somebody else said something, and then I noticed something. You know what often happens, you know, when suddenly you learn about something, you know, an actor or a word or a food, suddenly it's everywhere. It's like you haven't, it's like you were seeing it before, but you hadn't recognised it. And so I think that, you know, these conversations are part of an ongoing process that you can influence, but very much have to be driven by that own person's value, like I said, values, mindset, priorities. And everybody, you know, there are a million pathways towards climate action.
Thank you, Rebecca, so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And just fantastic to hear how people's attitudes are, well, probably too late, but no, never too late, how people's attitudes are shifting. And if you would like to read Rebecca's incredible book, and as I say, I can't recommend it enough, you know what? You will automatically go in the running to win it if you donate $100 or more before 8 o'clock tonight, because you'll go into that crazy raffle where you could win Rebecca's book, my book. Sure, there it is. Oh, isn't she gorgeous? I don't talk a lot about climate. I mainly talk about myself, but climate does get a bit of a run in there. Greg Mullins' book is in the raffle, as is Claire O'Rourke's, as is 3 months of coffee from Market Lane and a $250 clothes voucher from Gorman. So that's pretty fantastic. Thank you again, Rebecca. And the winner of the Chickpea Challenge was Carissa, and the runner-up was Saki. So thank you so much again to Ethical Investments who are sponsoring that, and who, do not forget, are going to throw in another $1,000 if we reach our target. Speaking of which, Lena, how are we looking?
Let's have a look. Where are we at? Whoa, we just crashed the $30,622. That's so exciting.
Well, it is exciting, but it's not enough. So nobody get complacent because we've got a long way to go. I mean, I want to see these two women, you know, get cake in their faces, and who knows, if we get a lot more money, I might get involved in a challenge. I don't want to say too much, but something like that might happen. How's your cake looking, Lena?
It's disgusting. I mean, it looks actually quite nice. This is Jane's cake, a beautiful heart.
So you've gone for
sauce,
sweet.
Vegemite.
Oh no, you've both gone for savoury.
Yes, on the sweet. I mean, like, I prefer savoury to sweet. I tried the cake. It's pretty disgusting in itself. It's far too sweet for me, but it stings. God, this Vegemite stings like.
So if you want to see Lena with a cake on her face, and Jane, God knows I do, we need to have more money than 30,000. 30,000 is a great start, but what we've got less than an hour to go, and we need to raise at least $20,000 more. And, you know, if you want to see me do something humiliating, yes, I realise I've been doing humiliating things for the last 34 years, but if you really want to see me step it up, then we've really got to get some more money coming through. But now it's time to hear from Climate for Change's very very own Mike McAvoy. Mike is C4C's National Program Manager. He leads the incredible Climate Conversations program team. Over to you, Mike.
Thanks so much, Lena, and thanks to the volunteers behind the scenes, and thanks to everyone that's showing up to this session tonight. That in itself gives me a lot of hope. Here's the Climate Conversation program. Our volunteers support people to host climate conversations with their peers. So that host invites 8 or so friends around for a meal or a Zoom dinner party, if you like. And our job at Climate for Change is to train and support a volunteer facilitator. In fact, we support almost 100 of them to guide those conversations. They are facilitated conversations, and they're amongst an existing social network, which is a pretty key ingredient. So it's people who already know and trust each other, a group of friends or family members, work colleagues. And in the course or over the course of about 2 to 2.5 hours, our volunteer facilitators engage that group deeply enough so that they can understand the scale of the problem, some of the many solutions that are available, and come to the realization that one of the most powerful ways that we can take action as an individual is to actually reach out to each other and encourage others to take action, and to engage as citizens and constituents to put pressure directly on politicians to bring about those large-scale urgent changes that we need to actually reduce emissions. We're informed by a whole lot of social research and behavioral psychology, and one theory that forms like the basis of our theory of how change happens is called social diffusion theory. This is you might be familiar with this. This is the social diffusion curve. So it describes the way change is adopted progressively through society, slowly at first, and then really rapidly from left to right on this bell curve. So a new idea or a new product, whether it is civil rights or the adoption of the mobile phone, it always starts with a small group of innovators there on the far left, and then it passes to the next group, which are the early adopters. And all of those people influence the people around them. Once enough early adopters are on board, we hit a tipping point where the adoption of an idea moves really quickly through to the early majority, eventually the late majority, and even the laggards sometimes come on board and buy a mobile phone. Researchers have observed that change happens when people who aren't on board yet see people they know and trust taking action, and that they have conversations with those people about the actions they're taking and why. So this is actually one of the great reasons that fundraising with us is so powerful as well, because not only would you be raising money to support climate conversations to happen, but the very act of raising money means that you're taking an action and having a conversation about climate change, meaning you're influencing the people around you. The other key feature of our Climate Conversations program is it reaches into really new networks and has growth built into it. So at each conversation, we ask someone to volunteer to host the next one. In fact, we aim to have 2 people host a conversation from each conversation. And so in that way, we expand and reach deeper into communities away from that kind of usual band of the usual suspects that you imagine. And it really works. We have a great impact report that is available on our website. And through a lot of analysis, we found that we have been really effective at reaching the people who are concerned about climate change, but not particularly active yet. In fact, we've found that 58% of people weren't already on the mailing list of a climate or environment organisation. And we've seen those people all move up the scale and become much more active after attending a conversation. So our audience, 90% of our audience fit into those 3 categories that are in the light green turquoise colour there. So 33% would be considered wavering on the issue of climate change. They're yet to be convinced, but they're concerned. 37% would be passive. So they're quite concerned about climate change, but they're not yet doing anything to address it. And 20% are active. We follow up 3 or more months after a climate conversation with our audience. And what we found is that the percentage of people who are categorized as wavering halved, and the percentage of people who are categorized as active or leaders doubled, which is pretty extraordinary. Our impact report is full of heaps of stories of change, but I thought I'd share just a couple of personal examples, actually. While I was on council, I encouraged 3 of my family members to host a conversation for their friends. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about what I observed firsthand out of those conversations. Firstly, I've got to say the volunteer facilitator was amazing, clearly very well trained through Climate for Change, and just an amazing human who shared his story, and it really resonated. The change I witnessed within my family in the weeks and months afterwards, though, was the real highlight. So within days, my niece had divested her super and changed her bank accounts and posted on Facebook about it to encourage her friends to do the same. Probably not a huge amount of money for someone who was 18, but a very great thing that she did immediately. My mum changed political parties and started handing out how to vote cards for her new political party within a very short time. One of her friends signed up to become a facilitator and trained and did a number of conversations. My brother put solar panels on his roof of his house and started attending rallies and protests. Out of the conversations too, I think my conversation with my dad was able to go to a place that it hadn't yet reached, where I was able to explain to him why I was doing the things I was doing in my life and why it was so important. And he has gone on to become a major supporter and donor to climate organisations and started attending rallies too. I think my family members would have all been categorised as passive before the conversation. And it's possible that 2 of them would have even been in the wavering camp, and they've all really moved into the active or leaders category. This slide that's up now are some of the impacts of the conversation program in numbers rather than stories. 77% of people that come to a conversation have told us that the conversation influenced a change in at least one of their behaviours. Almost half were like my mum and her friends who are contacting politicians more frequently, and many of them for the first time. 54% volunteer or donate to climate organisations more frequently. 46% adopting individual behaviour change, like my brother, installing solar, or like us in our household, eating less red meat through the week. 1 in 4 changed power company, 78% pledged to vote climate, and 1 in 3 divested, like my niece. Over the past 12 months in the lead up to the federal election, we worked really closely with climate organisations and grassroots groups right across the country. And I think we finally had the climate election that we've been aiming for. During that period of time, in the election period, climate conversations, our climate action sessions or cafe sessions, climate action for everyone, also our MP engagement groups and other events that we ran, we engaged over 1,500 people. We also saw 2,280 letters, or at least we counted that many. I'm pretty sure there'd be more, to MPs and candidates, letters to the editor, all actions ensuring that politicians really took a clear message away from this election that climate was the #1 issue for a large number of Australians. We focused our work in 2 key seats in Ryan in Queensland and North Sydney. And that really helped contribute to big swings in those seats and showed that climate policy is essential, that politicians can't afford to have weak climate policies or eventually they get voted out. But our volunteers have been active in scores and scores of electorates over the last 6 years. I'm not expecting you to read these as they pop up on the screen, but many of these seats have seen similar swings and we've seen really great climate movements build out of these electorates over the years. So far, since 2016, we've trained 450 volunteers as facilitators. People right across the country have hosted over 1,320 conversations, and those conversations have been attended by more than 11,500 people. It is really exciting to see how these conversations create change, and we're now partnering with local councils and other organisations as far afield as Scotland even, but mostly in Australia, to help other organisations replicate the successes of our program. Our MP engagement group program is also growing, and we're really excited to see how we can harness all of that energy to apply some strategic pressure to this current federal government. So I really believe that we're proving that if we engage enough people and help them see the urgency of the climate crisis and equip them with the skills and the confidence to talk about climate change, and then engage directly with their local MP, then politicians will follow. They'll introduce progressively more ambitious policy, put budget behind it, and make things happen, because that's how social and political change happens. People influence each other, they step up to make noise, and politicians inevitably change their tune because they need to represent the demands of their electorate, or they risk losing their seat.
Thanks so much, Mike. And just some incredibly tangible results there that show just how important the work Climate for Change is doing. So why haven't you donated yet? Thank you to the many people who have. Someone called Grandma just donated $1,000. A round of applause for Grandma from everybody. Boy, it was great to join my local MP engagement group. A couple of our members went off recently and met our local member, Josh Burns from McNamara, and we're hopefully going to get him to come along to a meeting. So it is such a good feeling to get involved with all of that stuff. I'm feeling great about Grandma. I'm feeling great about Mike. I'm not feeling great about the coffee catch-ups, Lena, especially because I did very well with the coffee catch-ups last year and the year before. So if you donate $100 or more, you can have a Zoom coffee catch-up with me, with Mark Seymour, with Amanda McKenzie, with Frank Giotso, Claire O'Rourke. Could you talk us through it, Lena? Because something's not getting through.
I get the impression it must be the case. Because at the moment, Katie has a guaranteed coffee catch-up with you. So if you want to win a coffee catch-up with, for example, Judith, you have to actually donate to her fundraiser. So if we share the page now, guys, so we can see it, you type in Judith, you donate to her, and I know you want to support your friends. You can do both.
I don't care about your friends. I want you to donate to me.
You do want to donate to Judith, and then say, and the donation is towards Lena's fundraiser or Katie, whoever you're supporting tonight. That way you have guaranteed your raffle tickets towards winning a coffee with Judith Lucy or with Mike Seymour.
I mean, admittedly, maybe people just want to give money and they just couldn't care less about the coffee catch-ups. And, you know, any way you cut it, we really just want your cash. But it would be lovely to have a Zoom coffee catch-up with someone. So please know that, you know, $100 gets you into the coffee catch-ups, and $100 also gets you into the incredible raffle where you can win lots of great books, 3 months of coffee from Market Lane, and a $250 voucher from Gorman. But now, when I've got this look on my face, you know what it's time for. It's time for another Fellows Challenge. And this is the one where they stick as many grapes as possible into their mouth in a minute. I mean, why wouldn't you? How do they do it for the prize? Thank you again to Ethical Investments. The winner gets $200. The runner-up gets $100. Everyone else gets $50. Do not forget to vote for your favorite in the chat section. Over to you, fellows.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire and I care about climate change because it's an issue that affects our world, our generation and all generations in the future. So I want to fundraise with C4C to encourage meaningful climate change action and through meaningful conversations. Over to Gala.
Hola, my name is Gala and I'm fundraising for Climate for Change for meaningful action in climate change to make a proactive society. Because I believe in the power of conversations, open conversations with people that care about the environment have shaped me and my actions. And because I believe that the power is in the people. We can all make this a better place for all living species. Over to you, Will.
Hey everyone, my name is Will. I'm fundraising for Climate for Change for all the wonderful creatures in the world, humans and animals that inhabit our Earth and are under threat from a changing climate, and having conversations is a huge part of that. Over to Durant.
Hey guys, I'm Duran, and the reason why I care about climate action is because I want to be able to preserve the earth for our future generations and not just leave it as it is, but in fact make it better. Over to you, Hung.
Hello everyone, I'm Hun. I'm fundraising with Climate for Change because recently we have experienced lots of climate change impact, such as flood and bushfire. And I really believe that climate conversation is really a useful way to encourage people and help them to know more about climate change. And I hope that for these people, more people can be inspired to take action to save the world together. Over to you, Georgia.
Thank you. I'm Georgia and I'm fundraising with C4C to overcome my climate anxiety and learn how to influence collective action and change, because for many of us it's so overwhelming that it can sometimes feel taboo to talk about. So I want to be able to encourage more open and transformative conversations about climate change. So for our challenge today, we are going to compete with each other to stuff as many grapes as we can into our mouths. And we're doing this challenge because our climate is in grape danger. So we will chaotically attempt to do this in 1 minute or less if we reach capacity, and you get to vote for the winner. So are we ready? We'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. Let's go.
Okay, so that's a wrap.
Wow, and the world is in great danger. You see, this is why you leave comedy to the professionals. And I don't want to influence anyone's voting there, but I found Will's commitment, well, nothing short of terrifying. I tell you what else I'm terrified about. The fact that we only have about half an hour to go and we have stalled, people. We came out very strong at the beginning. Oh, we got 26,000 like that. Now we've been stuck on 30 for about half an hour. We've only got 30 minutes to raise $20,000. So what is wrong with you? I want all the grandmothers out there donating $1,000. I want the grandfathers donating $2,000. I want fathers, mothers, and the barren people. Come on, the barren people with no children like me. Why aren't you donating? Now, we know that Lena and Jane are going to put some cakes in their faces if we reach $50,000. Well, if you want to see me put a cream pie in my face while wearing a nude suit, then we have got to reach $50,000. This is serious business, people. I mean, it's humiliating enough to wear a nude suit. For those of you who don't know the nude suit, I popped it on last year. Again, the saliva is coming, but that's not from excitement. It's from anger and disappointment. The nude suit is like a flesh-colored leotard where I have simply drawn on nipples, pubic hair, and a bum crack with a texter. Believe me, you will never forget it. I will wear that and I will get, yes, look, I've got a baking tray here. I will fill it full of shaving cream and that will go straight in my face while I'm wearing the nude suit. If that and saving the planet isn't worth $20,000 in the next half an hour, well, I don't know what is. And I'm really disappointed. So let's see if we can move things along. And to inspire you, I'm going to introduce our next guest. Claire O'Rourke is a journalist, a communication specialist, and she's going to tell us all about her new book, Together We Can, Inspiring Stories of Everyday People Taking Action on Climate Change. Take action now. Donate. Over to you, Jane and Claire.
Thank you so much, Claire O'Rourke, for being part of our event tonight. It's so wonderful to have you along.
Thanks for having me. It's so exciting that you've got this event with all these fantastic speakers happening. So I'm just very grateful to be part of it.
So I've got a couple of questions for you tonight. First of all, I'd love to ask you a little bit about yourself and why you care so much about taking action on climate change.
Yeah, well, I live on Dharawal country, which is, Wollongong, just south of Sydney. So I'm very privileged to live in a place called Ostermere, which is surrounded by, on the one side, by incredible Illawarra escarpment rainforest that's just literally almost out my back door. And then we're also quite close to the beach. So we're about a 10-minute walk from a range of beautiful beaches that stretch down the northern Illawarra coast. So I think I've worked in social justice and advocacy on a range of issues over the last kind of 15, 20 years. So I was a journalist first, but I worked on disability and, you know, press freedom rights and human rights and, you know, workers' rights, a whole range of different issues. But this is kind of a funny story, but the Throwdown Challenge actually came from me when I got an email from GetUp that was one of these member surveys that says, tell us what you care about. And I looked at the list and I thought, this is silly, I'm going to tick all the boxes because I care about all of these things. But it made me take a second look. And the big thing that landed for me was that if we don't have a healthy environment, we don't have any progress on any of the other things, because all of these issues are, you know, intersectional, to use a complicated word, but it's like everything is connected. And, you know, at the baseline, if our environment is unhealthy, we're unhealthy. And, you know, that was when that email, thank you, GetUp, landed when my children were still reasonably young. They're, you know, teenagers now and, you know, getting towards the end of high school. And, you know, thinking about what the future holds for them was really landing for me at that time. So, you know, there's obviously self-interest, which I think we all share, about wanting to protect your family and, you know, making sure, you know, they're healthy and well-fed and well cared for, not just by you, but by society and by the environment, but also about those systemic issues that I have worked on and care deeply about. So that's kind of where it comes from for me.
That makes perfect sense. You've got a new book out, Together We Can. Tell us about it.
Oh, well, this book actually came as a result of my own little climate freakout moment. And I'm sure lots of people watching have had one, two, or several climate freakout moments. I was already back working in the climate movement full time, you know, in work to transition the energy sector. When the Black Summer fires hit, you know, we experienced, like many of your members and supporters will have experienced, you know, that kind of acrid yellow smoke in the sky. Down here on Dharawal country, we had thousands and thousands of flying foxes, so like bats, coming in at dusk, and they just had never appeared in our environment before. So it was this kind of oppressive, checking the air quality apps, looking at these skies, seeing the kind of the bats coming. It was like end of days kind of stuff. And we did, yeah, it was really confronting. Particularly, you know, acknowledging that I live in a privileged place and I have lots of opportunity, and I live in this kind of suburban feeling kind of place. It's beautiful, but it's suburban. And it just felt really weird to be packing up our house, thinking about we might have to evacuate because there's lots of trees, and there was a lot of concern from our local fire authorities that we would have to leave. Didn't have to in the end, but that impacted on me, impacted on my family, just the kind of trauma of that, like it did for so many Australians. We lost so many lives and animals and plants, and, you know, about a fifth of our eastern forests burned in those fires. So after the fires and when the pandemic started rolling in, we embarked on a project at the Sunrise Project called Climate Compass. And that was a study of Australian attitudes on climate change. And that study surfaced a group that we actually called the Alarmed, which was about 24% of Australians, so close to 5 million people, were pretty well as worried about climate change as I was. And, you know, there are significant studies that have been done in recent years in Australia and overseas that talk about these incredible levels of climate distress, which is a rational reaction to the state of the world. So if you're feeling that way, don't worry. Lots of people are feeling the same way as you. And it's also something that we need to face. So I was reflecting on that and did a bunch of personal work on that I write about in the book, kind of processing those kind of feelings of grief and sadness and anxiety and uncertainty. And at the same time, was really noticing the lack of good news stories. And I'm in a very privileged position in my work that I see lots of terrific things and developments that are happening across the energy sector, lots of wonderful work that's being done in advocacy particularly, but I wanted to look a little bit beyond that. And once I started surfacing stories, there were so many, examples of really great work that's being done across all sectors, in all parts of the country, that it just filled a book really easily.
Thank you. I had a similar experience to you during those fires. When the smoke crisis rolled out in Melbourne, I was heavily pregnant with my daughter Pip, and I've had many doctors say to me since that breathing the air as a pregnant woman during that time wasn't safe for my baby inside me. And it's just such a worrying thing to have to think about as a parent these days. It's shocking. And I loved hearing about some of the stories of hope. Are there any standout stories that you wanted to share with folks tonight?
Oh, there's so many. The story that I'm sure Suzanne Mungle is watching this broadcast, and she's a Climate for Change volunteer, conversation host, and just amazing person, wonder of a person. I was so fortunate to be introduced to Suzanne, but she kind of went through an incredible change, and I don't want to speak for her because she's probably watching and she'll want to talk about it herself, but she went through a kind of recasting of her life around climate and was called to action by essentially the pointy end was by Greta Thunberg when she made her speech to the UN a few years ago, where she said, "How dare you?" And she's told me that Greta was speaking to her. And so now she's doing all these amazing things, like hosting loads of climate conversations as part of Climate for Change, but also, hosting an Ordinary Eco Mums Facebook group. She's from Kingaroy in Queensland, which I didn't really expect to find a lot of climate activists in Kingaroy. It's the peanut capital of Australia. But she's now lobbying the Upper Burnett Council, with others. It's just incredible to see what one person can start when they make the decision that they're really sick of what's going on and they want to do something about it. And I think what's also really interesting about her story is that Suzanne, she's a great connector and networker. And one of the messages and some of the research that I talk about in the book is how, if you want to spread information, celebrities are helpful, people who have big profile and lots of notoriety. But if you really want to spread behaviour change and see the kind of change that we're going to need on the kind of incredible social scale that we have, we're going to have to leverage all of our networks. Ordinary people can be most influential when it comes to behaviour change. So if people are thinking that there's not really much they can do or they don't have a lot of resources, one of the big messages from the book is consider your networks, because you'll be probably very surprised at who's in them and, who's also worried.
So inspiring. I personally found it really hopeful to read the stories in your book. If others want to read more about it, how can they get their hands on a copy?
Well, you can order it through my website, which is just my name, claireo'rourke.com. You can find it in all independent bookstores. I'm told Big W's also stocking it in some stores, which is great. Let's get the message out enormously. But also through Booktopia or Amazon, you can buy ebook copies as well if you don't want to purchase the paper version, which a lot of folks want to, save the paper. So go for that.
Cool.
I thought I'd just show this amazing little thing from the Knitting Nanas Illawarra group that they knitted for me. Hope never quits.
So beautiful.
How gorgeous is that? So I think that's always the big thing with climate action. It's not what can I do, but it's what will I do now and what will I do next, because everyone's on their own climate journey.
What a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Claire. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all your
having
work.
me. Thanks for having me along.
Thank you so much, Claire. And she is so right, because climate change intersects with pretty much every other issue you can think of. What about refugees? Climate change. What about racism? Climate change. What about gender equality? Climate change. So thank you for pointing that out, Claire. And you could get a coffee catch-up, a Zoom coffee catch-up with Claire if you donate $100 or more to her page. But forget that. Donate to my page, because you could get a coffee catch-up with me or Mark Seymour or Amanda McKenzie or Frank Giotto. You could also get Claire's book in the raffle. If you donate $100 before the end of the show tonight, we're going to let it go to 8:06 because we started a bit late. There's Rebecca Huntley's book. There's Greg's book. There's the incredible $250 voucher from Gorman. And there's 3 months of coffee from Market Lane. So for those of you who haven't donated yet, what's wrong with you? Duh, duh, duh. That can only mean one thing. The winner of the Grape Challenge was Georgia. I think Will was obviously just too terrifying for people. And the runner-up was Gala or Gala. My apologies for mispronouncing that at some point. Thank you to Ethical Investments for sponsoring the challenges. They will throw in another $1,000, of course, if we reach our target, but I'm just not so sure that we're going to get there. I mean, okay, I'm doing this right now. I'm doing this right now. And if you would like to see that wind up in my face, well, you know, get cracking. I mean, I noticed we have been getting some amazing donations from people, but people, we've only got about 20 minutes to raise about another. Oh, that smells disgusting. I mean, I do shave my face, but I usually don't use cream. Anyway, let's get an update and see how we're going. Lena, Jane, are we going to make it?
Oh my goodness, we are up to an incredible $34,000.
We're still in the 30s. We're not going to make it. We are not going to make it. We've only got 20 minutes to go. That is ridiculous. We're not even in the 40s. What is wrong with you people? The planet is dying. And don't you want to see these smug mothers wind up with their cakes in their faces? I certainly do. I mean, I know a lot of people in Australia would like to see me wind up with shaving cream in my face. And what about the nerd suit? Come on, people, do it for the Great Barrier Reef. Do it for the whales. Do it for all of us. Let's start donating now. We really don't have long to go. And, you know, those cakes are just looking more and more disgusting. So I know I've been annoying. I'm going to get more and more annoying unless we reach that target. We've only got about 20 minutes to go. Please, if you've been thinking about it, now is the time to donate. We will get that extra $1,000 from Ethical Investments. We will see the board do humiliating things. Me, Lena, Jane, you know you want it. You know you want to see us humiliate ourselves, and we're prepared to do it. I need to keep swallowing because I'm just getting so worked up. But now let's hear from the incredible CEO of the Climate Council and a specialist in climate communications. She's absolutely wonderful. I interviewed her for the Weekly, so I also happen to know she's got an amazing sense of humor. Amanda McKenzie, take it away. Lena and Amanda, donate!
Thank you, Amanda, for being here tonight. The Climate Council is always like my trusted source of information when I want to know what does the climate science say today and how should I talk about it. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about climate change. And to start off, why does climate change matter to you personally?
Oh, it's such a good question. I've been asked it so many times, and I think it evolves over time as you learn more about it and as you get more involved. And I think when I started working on climate change, it was a real moment for me when I read Tim Flannery's book, The Weathermakers. I was hiking in the forest in Tasmania in this sort of ancient forest, the Styx Valley, with these enormous trees, and thinking about how, you know, oh, we could change the climate in just a generation. I want to be part of getting ahead of that and preventing these terrible things from happening that I was reading about in the book. But now, that was 2005, so sort of 17 years on, here we are, we're experiencing these impacts. So, you know, it's still the same motivation, which is essentially to prevent human suffering and to also realize human potential at the same time. Like, I think if we are able to collaborate effectively worldwide to tackle this problem, it almost takes us as a species to the next level. It's that big. It would be an amazing feat of our civilization, and it must be an amazing feat of our civilization to tackle this challenge.
And when you, at the Climate Council, you often talk about this being the critical decade for climate action. Like, we have now this narrow window of opportunity where we still can do things that will improve our lifetime's quality, but also especially the quality of our children. What do you mean with that? Like,
we really try and emphasize the urgency of action this decade So there's obviously been a lot of talk about achieving net zero emissions by 2050. And that is far too late, but also it shifts the thinking of, okay, this is a future challenge. We need to be getting emissions down in the future. We want to recontextualize and say, this is the decade for action. We need the lion's share of effort to happen now if we're to be on any track to reduce emissions to the scale required. So the scientific analysis that our scientists have done shows, and they're world-class scientists and it's been peer-reviewed internationally, shows that Australia would need to reduce our emissions 75% this decade and then to net zero by 2035. People will say that that's impossible, and it's certainly very difficult to see what the pathway is, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be our aim. It does mean that there is a level of disruption in the change that we're advocating for, because the alternative is massive disruption from climate change. We're already seeing some of that disruption with the Black Summer fires, with the flooding in Australia, and now these enormous heat waves occurring across the Northern Hemisphere. So, you know, we're in the midst of this climate crisis right now. We either accept a little bit of disruption, and it might be more than a little bit in terms of getting to net zero very rapidly, and then we put ourselves in the best possible scenario to prevent the worst of the climate crisis.
And you're saying we need to aim for 75%, but our current government, it's a step up, but it's not enough. It's aiming for 43% by 2030. What do you think needs to happen and change in Australia to get our government to the point that they will actually fix the problem?
The way I see it is that the federal government will always be a follower. I think it's been very hard for federal governments in the Australian context to lead. And when there has been leadership, we've seen that eroded through scare campaigns and ultimately, you know, Tony Abbott coming to power and taking apart a lot of climate action. So what does it take for a federal government to follow to get 75%? That means that the community has to have gone a long way in terms of what they're clamouring for from the government. It means that business has gone a long way, industry, state governments, local governments. It really pulls into focus all of these other actors in society and makes the work you're doing, for instance, really important in how we tackle the problem. So we can't just be saying, you know, the federal government needs to do this, the federal government needs to do that. Yes, but we need to have laid the groundwork. I often call it an on-ramp for a federal government to then make those commitments.
And what are the opportunities to see for them to, like, in Parliament to create the changes to achieve?
I think is looking at what is the agenda that Labor's laid out, whether it's saying that they'll do an electric vehicle policy or whether it's rewiring the nation. There's a whole range of different policies they came to the election with. And so I think the first step is working with them to say, how strong can these policies be, and demonstrating community support, and then creating what you could call a virtuous cycle. So when a government then introduces certain climate action, that they are celebrated for it. In the past, climate action has been considered something that uses political capital, and Labor comes from the climate wars, if you like, feeling burnt multiple times because they've done things and then they've suffered electorally in their perception as a result. How do we flip that on its head and say every action on climate change, there is this virtuous circle that you get celebrated, then it builds your capacity and your political capital for the next wave of action. So that requires those of us that are in external to Parliament roles to be making sure that we're making the case, we're defending the policies, we are then arguing for them to be stronger, but we're celebrating the successes as they come over the line. And we're tackling the scare campaigns that may well come from certain areas of the press or commentators or the opposition, etc.
And together we open up the window more and more of what's possible by, like, creating a community that is supportive of climate change.
Absolutely. And I'm in no way saying Labor's perfect. They're certainly, I wouldn't say that they are. And, you know, we've got a long way to go in terms of persuading them on coal and gas, for instance, both in terms of shutting down new projects, how we tackle the export issue, how we tackle phasing out coal and gas. But we're in a much better position than we were in the past. And again, I just firmly believe that you've got to socialise in front of a government to get them to the point of agreeing to what you want.
I agree. I believe deeply in community as being the space of where you push, like, as being climate for change. But I also believe, like, when I came to Australia 10 years ago from Europe, I found it quite flabbergasting to find out that we're still in the debate of, like, should we do anything about climate change? And now finally, 10 years later, we are at that point where we're talking, yes, it's happening. What should we do? And now we need to get to the, like, how fast can we do it, and supported by communities. What would be your tips for people who have conversations on climate change with other people, like to motivate them to join? Like, we're all about activating, in particular, people who have not yet been active in the climate movement. I find in our conversation, usually people come in and they have, as we said earlier, they've experienced what it means to live in a climate crisis. They're actually feeling deep fear inside. We know that 70% of Australians care about climate change, but only 23% or 22% of them actually have ever talked about it to someone else. Right. Often in our conversations, like, it happens over and over that people say, like, I've never known that you also cared, and realize that they're not alone with their fear. So, like, what are your tips for conversation on climate change with friends and family?
Yeah. I think we all struggle to talk to our friends and family about things that we find really scary because we don't want to scare others. But as you're saying, if we're feeling that fear, probably others in our network that probably have similar values to us and are reading the same sorts of material are having those same fears. So I think it's a little bit of biting the bullet and, you know, raising those issues, particularly when you can in a conversation where you can be vulnerable. So often a one-on-one conversation to say, hey, I'm feeling really worried about this. Are you seeing that as well? And usually the other person will say, and they'll give you a pretty clear indication early on whether they're comfortable having that conversation. But even the act of raising it can feel somewhat empowering. Some people, you know, may need to raise it with a few different people to find that person. But there are also so many different groups now that you can engage with. So whether it's Parents for Climate Action, whether it's your group, whether it's bushfire survivors, surfers for climate action, there's so many individual groups out there now that are catering to different audiences and have different memberships. So there is a community of like-minded people out there to connect with, which is really powerful.
That fits pretty much with what we do and how we communicate as well. And I think, like, especially the connecting with people afterwards and finding your community is, like, really important if you become an activist or get engaged in any way to, like, feel hope. Because, like, being with like-minded people gives you hope. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your time.
Thank you, Amanda Mackenzie. And she is right. Let's take our species to the next level. You know how you can take the species to the next level? I think you do. I think you know you need to donate. I think you know that's what it takes. Do you know what the target is? The target's $50,000. Do you know what we've got? We've got just over 35. Thanks for nothing. I thought you cared about the Great Barrier Reef. I thought you cared about the koalas. I thought you cared about the children. I thought you cared about seeing me in this nude suit. But you don't care, do you? Because we've got to raise about $15,000 in about 20 minutes. So you know what? Forget it. I'm leaving. I'm just not interested anymore because clearly you're not. You don't care about the planet. You don't care about anything. We've only got 20 minutes. What's wrong with you people? And if you donate, you get to go in for a coffee catch up with Amanda. You get to go in for a coffee catch up with me, Mark Seymour. Again, the Saliva thing. Frank Jotzo, Claire O'Rourke. You donate, you go into the raffle. You could win my book, Rebecca's book, Greg Mullins' book, Claire's book. You get 3 months of coffee. You get a $250 voucher for Gorman clothing. But who cares about any of that? We care about the planet. Come on. You know what? We reached the target last year when we did this. We reached the target the year before. Do you really want this to be the year where people just went, oh, who cares? No, you don't. We've only got about 20 minutes, so come on. You know you want to see me in the nude suit. You know you want to see Lena and Jane get cake smashed into their faces. And you know you want to do this for the planet, so come on. Let's go for a big Aussie finish, everyone. We need to raise $15,000. And to inspire you, let's hear from the rock god himself. As I said, creepy as it is, I probably wanted to sleep with this man since I was a teenager. He used to be out front of hunters and collectors, how I wanted him to throw his arms around me. And now he's out front of the undertow. Over to you, Jane and Mark Seymour. Get donating!
Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. It's such an absolute thrill to have you here. Firstly, you've spoken and written quite evocatively about climate change. I'm thinking in particular about quite a haunting audio diary on your blog, the Tarago Diaries, reflecting on a trip up to Bendigo on a bushfire day. You spoke of country towns monstered by clouds spewing impossible flames and lost houses and towns and animals screaming in the dark. I grew up on that Calder Freeway, the road you took out to Bendigo. I grew up in a town called Macedon, and the country you evoked is really familiar to me. And likewise, the conditions that you evoked, the hot, dry wind, the smoke in the air. Any kid growing up in a town like I did knows what a bushfire day feels like. And when I think about climate change, that's what I think about. For you, what was your wake-up moment for climate change?
Well, that particular weekend, there was a profound sense of foreboding, and it was in all the media as well. Like, it was quite a critical set of numbers, and everyone was talking about it. And you know, the 2007 or 2008, whenever that massive fire happened in the northeast of Melbourne, was oddly enough, and the Hunters and Collectors did a relief concert for that as well right back then. So it was kind of in our blood, I suppose. And I recollected a similar feeling. But look, I'd just like to say, I don't really feel that there's been any great epiphanies. I think I'm like a pretty typical member of the population that is had this dawning awareness, growing awareness over time that things aren't the way they were, you know, and that the notion that weather is actually affecting us directly now is finally reaching a point where, well, you know, people talk about, and scientists talk about tipping points and everything else, but I think the broader population don't really see it like that. And trying to encourage people to, I hate to use the word, but I will, lean in and actually go, well, you know what? This is, I have to own this, and as an individual, and really that meaningful political change can only occur when the greater good is accepted as part of the equation.
It's getting pretty hard to ignore the impacts of climate damage here in Australia, particularly over the last 12 months. We've seen terrible storms and floods all up the East Coast. Have you personally been affected by wild weather like this?
Well, that there was that Bendigo story I wrote about. Real kicker was what ended up interrupting the last major tour I was on with Hunters and Collectors before COVID. So it was kind of like this phenomenal meeting of naturally occurring disasters that happened over a very, very short period of time. But we actually had to drive into Bateman's Bay from Canberra Airport, and then the tour stopped immediately after that. And we drove through the Alpine Ranges, you know, just down on the eastern side of the New South Wales border to get to Bateman's Bay. And it's like this really long descent out of the hills to get down to the coast. And the driving through that mountain road, there's only one way of doing it, right? And that sort of sometimes happens when you're touring, that you have to get to an airport and then you have to go to this, especially if it's regional, you know, you might be 2 or 3 hours on the road getting to the gig. And that was like really confronting because, you know, we'd gone in there just after the fires had gone through and you could smell it, you know, and as far as we could see in any direction, you're on this mountain road and the hills are just rust, you know, or black actually. And, you know, a lot of those photographs were published subsequently to that cataclysm, but then the gig itself as well, like, you know, playing in the dark just as the sun was going down, and there's just in this big football field and there's thousands of people from in the community who've turned up, and, you know, the palpable sense of relief that they were able to do this, you know, they could actually come together and listen and celebrate music after this other thing had happened was deeply emotional. I mean, it was very, very powerful show. Like it just felt really close.
What scares you about what's coming down the line for us?
Look, without risking cliche, but I do really feel for my children. They're young adults now, and they are going to be spending most of their lives in an environment where those challenges will have to be constantly met. You know, year in, year out until they die. That's the hard thing to accept. But at the same time, I'm really reluctant to feel intimidated by it. I think you've got to get above that, and you've got to actually go, well, it's kind of like accepting that our fate, we've drawn the lines of our own fate, and we have to actually grapple with it now. It's already here, obviously, and we have to actually be really proactive about in our consciousness of the environment and make choices we can afford to make, of course, in terms of our own behavior. And I don't see that we can do anything else, you know, and be courageous about that, you know.
Does that give you hope?
Oh, I always have hope, you know. I always have hope. I'd say I'm politically optimistic, you know? And I always feel that whenever there's, you know, I mean, I'm 66, so I've seen a lot of action in terms of Australian historical. I mean, I'm a student of politics. I love it, you know, but I always feel that there's a central place that the public get to ultimately, where they can see that they're, you know, the people they've voted for are operating in their best interests, and they adopt a position of faith. But they've got to get to that place, you know, where, you know, like we've got this 43% cap, and I think that will definitely change as a consequence of horse trading in the federal parliament. I think that is actually going to happen. And it's a very clever strategy that Albanese has adopted, because he's been a master of very little, but he's actually managed to play people off against each other. And now we're hopefully getting to a place where, as again, and the word hope just springs up, where that number will increase.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mark. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Thank you, Mark Seymour. And don't forget, if you donate $100 or more to Mark's page, you can go on the running to get a half-hour Zoom coffee catch-up with him. You can still get a coffee catch-up with me. You can get a coffee catch-up with Amanda McKenzie, Frank Giotto, Claire O'Rourke. And there are only moments left to donate and go on the running for the brilliant raffle where you can win my book. You can win Rebecca Huntley's book. You can win Claire O'Rourke's book, Greg Mullins' book. There is the 3 months of coffee from Market Lane. There's the $250 worth of fashion from Gorman. Oh my God, we're only minutes from the end and we haven't even cracked $40,000. Come on, I'm begging you, Australia, with everything I've got. If you're on the line, please donate. Now I'm handing it up to Lena and Jane to talk about how much money we've raised. Come on, ladies.
We are still 3Ks away from at least raising $40,000. So guys, let's get that cracking.
Hopeless. I'm embarrassed to be an Australian.
Luckily, I'm not.
Luckily, she's not, which means she does not like Vegemite, but she is going to get a cake smothered in Vegemite in her face. My God.
Well, is she?
Is she? No, I'm not.
It seems unlikely.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely. And I want you to follow Lex's mom's and dad's example and give $500 plus so that we finally reach our goal tonight. Because this is pretty disgusting. You can see the mayonnaise curling over, tomato. I've put lovingly golden pepper, and I really want to smush it into Jane's face. I've been fantasizing about this all night long, and I'm going to keep putting on barbecue sauce as we speak.
I've got a bit of mustard here.
Well, you're very optimistic, ladies, because I just think people have stopped. I think people have stopped caring. They don't want the
care about
cakes. They
my
don't want me
baby.
in the nude suit. And you know what? They don't care about the planet. Come on, people. We've got about 10 minutes left. Give it everything you've got. And you know what? It's time to donate while the most mystifying challenge of all is being played for you, because the Climate for Change board, they said they would do a challenge if we reach $30,000. And we have reached $30,000. It's just a pity that we sat there for about 45 minutes and that we haven't even hit $40,000. Good God, what is wrong with you people? But we are going to see the board do, I mean, it's difficult to describe. It's kind of performance art, using nothing but themselves. They are going to convey the impact of climate change along with the solutions. Good luck, everybody. But thank you to Ethical Investments. The winner will get $200. The runner-up will get $100. Everyone else will get $50. Don't forget to vote for the person who is the most ludicrous, although could be any of them. But please, please donate. We really only have a few minutes left. I want to wear the nude suits. I want to see these ladies smoosh cakes into their faces. But right now, over to the board. Yikes. Thank you for whatever that was. And you don't have long to vote, so please do vote for whoever was the most, well, you fill in the word there, put their name in the chat. You know, we're going to play a wonderful clip now, and quite frankly, I don't think you deserve it. But anyway, here we go. You can still donate. You know, you've only got probably about 4 minutes left to donate. I mean, forget the nude suit. That's gone. I mean, if the cake happens, that will be a miracle. But we do have an extraordinary clip from our wonderful supporter, Mark Seymour, who is singing with the equally wonderful Missy Higgins. They are doing a beautiful track called The Whole World is Dreaming. When we come back, we'll hear who won the CEO challenge. Oh, no, sorry. We'll hear who won the board challenge. And, well, will we see the CEOs do anything with cakes? Will we see me in a nude suit? It seems highly unlikely. But take it away, Missy and Mark.
Sleep, sleep now, my love. There's nothing to fear. I'm right here beside you. Fly, fly through the night. The stars in the window are flying above you. Little lights that shine in the dark. Creatures alive in your heart. Angels will come to carry you home. You're never alone when the whole world is dreaming. Birds are calling a love song to guide you. High, high on the clouds, the desert is waiting. Her arms will find you, and there's nothing to fear. Angels will come to carry you home. You're never alone when the whole world is dreaming. Angels will come to carry you home. You're never alone when the whole world is dreaming. Angels will come to carry you home. You're never alone when the whole world is dreaming.
Thank you, Missy Higgins and Mark Seymour. That was absolutely beautiful. The winners of the Climate for Change Board Challenge, whatever the hell that was. Sue won. Liv was the runner-up. Thank you again to Ethical Investments. And it's that time. It's time for some thank yous. We are nearly very much at the end of this, and I know I've done a lot of yelling, but thank you for everything you have donated. So, you know, I know everyone has done their best. So I'm going to start saying thank you to all the incredible guests we had tonight. We had Greg Mullins, Professor Frank Giotto, Dr. Rebecca Huntley, Claire O'Rourke, Amanda McKenzie, and of course, Mark Seymour and Missy Higgins. Thank you to all the amazing sponsors, Ethical Investments, Ethical Investment Services, Gorman, Market Lane Coffee. Thank you so much to the incredible people at Simpatico who put all of this together. They're doing it all the way from America at like 3 in the morning. It's pretty incredible. So thank you so much to Megan, Zach, and Fahim. Thank you to all the C4C fellows and whatever the hell you were doing with the grapes and the chickpeas. Thanks to all the staff, everyone that helped this happen. Thank you to Azalia, who's downstairs, who has been amazing and putting all the stuff in the chat. You don't deserve this, but there it is. There it is. There is the nude suit. You know what? You're not getting this, but you are getting that. Over to you, ladies, for a final announcement about the money and where we're at.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, we got the nude suit in the end. It was all worth it. Our final target that we have reached tonight, $37,969. Thank you so much. We did not make 50, we made so much.
But you know what? There is 5 weeks of this. There is 5 weeks and $250,000 to make.
It's not too late. Thank you so much. A couple of final thank yous, really mainly just to our incredible community, our volunteer facilitators, our hosts. You are our power, our donors, our supporters. We're so proud to be working alongside you in this incredible work that we do every day. But finally, and most of all, thank you so much to everyone who donated tonight. I want to say a few personal thank yous. Sandy, Jane Fraser, Ria, John and Netta Lynch, gorgeous donation right there at the end. Thank you so much. It makes a huge difference to us. It really does make our work possible. And what the hell? $38,000. I'm going to smoosh this face in this cake into Lena's face. Come over here with us. We got a drop sheet down so we don't get cake everywhere. Oh my goodness.
I'm pretty sure you want to thank me, so you're welcome.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Judith Lucy.
Smash the cake! Smash the cake!
You're amazing.
No, it's too little, too late. A little bit like this whole evening.
And thank you to everyone who's been fundraising, to all our fundraisers who are fundraising for the next 5 weeks. You're all amazing. And we can't wait to keep doing this for you for the next 5 weeks. And that's why join us.
Do it. Do it, ladies. There is simply nothing to add to that. Well done, Lena and Jane. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please keep donating. Please keep supporting Climate for Change.
Thank you, everyone.
Signing off.
Thank you, Judith Lucy. Thank you.
Forget
Thank
it.
you,
Forget it. You didn't want the book. You know, I don't have children. Just forget it. I'm leaving.